I remember reading a lot of Eastern scripture, a lot of the Tao Te Ching and a lot of those teachings, and everything in those teachings was a paradox.
Yeah.
I remember reading these statements like, if you want to shrink something, let it expand.
Yeah.
Or if you want to get rid of something, allow it to flourish. And to the rational, intellectual mind, you're like, that does not make any sense. But I was like, okay, I'm having these looping, repetitive, obsessive, compulsive thoughts. I'm going to apply this teaching to these thought patterns and be like, okay, these thoughts I want to shrink or get rid of. So I guess I should allow them to expand and flourish. So I would tell these thought patterns, okay, like go play, go dance, go do whatever you want. And all of a sudden, as I gave space for that to happen, the mind goes completely silent, goes completely still. And what you realize is the more space you give these thoughts and emotions, the less they take. But the less you give them, the more square footage they need to take inside of you, because there's a need for them to be processed.
Greg, Rene Descartes is the man that essentially made the deal with the church to separate mind and matter or spirit, and to turn to the domain of matter, including the physical body, over to science, so that, matter and body became the territory of science and leave the matter of spirit, which includes mind, to the church. We're now seriously suffering the long-term effects of reductionist science and medicine and tremendous corruption and confusion within the Catholic Church and most Orthodox religions. This is exemplified by the fact that there are now over 32,000 variations of Christianity, all claiming to have the authentic truth. Anyone that reads the Bible is quick to learn that the body is shunned, considered dirty and sinful, as is sex and most things pleasurable, but wine seems to be okay. The medical system treats the body as a biological robot and sees illnesses as drug deficiency, or simply tries to replace the part that's dysfunctional. Psychiatry is predominantly a drug trade, and psychology is a mix of differing opinions on the issues of mental health, as vast and varied as the divisions and confusion within religions. Now we've got a working definition of mind, as you've just shared. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how these concepts from our past are potentially rooted in the vast amount of mental illness that we have in the world today. Do you understand what I'm saying with all that?
I do. And a couple of things there is, number one, when it comes to religion, I've studied a lot of the major world religions, and I think there's beauty in all of it, especially in the mystical teachings. But I've seen a lot of mental illness as a result of kind of like the conventional kind of Orthodox religion and their teachings. And the reason for that is, a lot of these religious teachings are very polarizing.
Yes.
They create a lot of division inside of people. And we're indoctrinated into this idea of like, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is a sin, this is okay, this you should do, this you shouldn't do, this you should touch, this you shouldn't touch, this you should think, and this you shouldn't think.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you take this newborn child who's born in the state of oneness, and you start to indoctrinate them into the system of polarizing their experience inside of themselves. And all of a sudden, all of the things that they're taught are good and, positive, and we attach to all of those things. And all of the things that we're told you shouldn't do that, that's negative, that's bad, that's wrong, that's sinful, we disassociate from those parts of ourselves. And we live in this constant state of attached to this, disassociate from that. This is good, this is wrong. You should think this, you shouldn't think that. So all of a sudden you take this child who's going through puberty and maybe starts, having an interest in masturbation, or might start having some homosexual thoughts. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they're in church and they're told, if you have homosexual thoughts, you're going to burn in hell. Right. Yeah. Something as simple as that, which I've worked with clients that have struggled with a lot of these patterns. All of a sudden they start having this shame and this guilt of having these thought patterns. So they start disassociating, they start resisting, they start suppressing, they start fragmenting themselves and divorcing themselves from certain parts of themselves. And all of a sudden you create things like OCD and anxiety and panic attacks and a lot of physical, mental, and emotional challenges. So I've already, worked with many, many clients where if we track the root cause of a lot of their mental, emotional challenges, it's a lot of these religious indoctrinations in which their whole sense of self internally is so polarized and so divided, and they just are so divorced from the parts of themselves that they're told are not okay.
Yes. And here, I'll do a little mind trick with you and everybody listening, just to show you how crafty this whole approach is and how dangerous it is. Greg, if I had you in an audience right now, which I do, they're just invisible to you. And I said to everybody in the room, don't think about the pink elephant. What are they going to have stuck in their head?
A pink elephant.
And the harder they try not to think about it, the more what's going to happen.
What you resist persists.
So you see, this technology is being used against us in religion, and it's being used against us in the new religion called scientism. Mm-hmm. And so what are we being told constantly? Wear a mask, separate yourself from people. Natural treatments don't work. You have to take this drug, right? There's your pink elephant.
Yeah. So obviously what you resist persists. And a lot of times if we're having certain thoughts or we're feeling certain emotions that we're told are not okay, the more we resist them, the more we infuse energy into them. And I experienced this with a lot of my OCD, where I would have thoughts and experiences that, I was having a lot of fear response. I felt like this is not okay. I shouldn't be having this. And all of a sudden they're on loop, they're on repeat. They constantly, circle back. And that's where people have what they call intrusive thoughts or constant repeating negative thoughts. And the only time something's an intruder is when it's not wanted.
Yes.
So anytime we're trying to push something away, it pushes right back.
Yes.
So, a lot of the work that I have to do with my clients and in my program is allowing these things to come in, making room, creating space to allow these thoughts and emotions to be present, welcome them in for some tea, sit at the table with them, ask them what they need, ask them if there's anything they want to share with us, and to start working and reintegrating these parts that we've shunned away because we've been indoctrinated into the belief system that these things are not okay.
Yes. And it's interesting too, because in my own work and healing process and studies of all this stuff, one of the things that I found is if you make a thought an object, like the fear of enjoying sex before you're married for a Christian can be a real paralyzing thing. And if you do it, it can lead to tremendous guilt and shame and, really help you develop a shadow real quick, because you got to bury that and hope God's not watching, so that's a tricky game to play. But most people, as you know, don't want to go into their shadow side. They don't want to go into their judgments, their fears, their self-resent, their self-dislike, their shame, their guilt. So whenever we're working with thoughts that we keep in our mind, like that pink elephant, as long as you keep looking at the pink elephant because I told you not to think about it, inherently we want to know what it is that's in the room that we can't see. So we keep looking for it. And then they're thinking, well, how can Paul see this pink elephant? So they keep charging it up. Mm-hmm. I think I may have done this exercise with you. I don't know if you use this one. I'll describe it. And it's a great one for everybody to do listening, either as I say it or at your own pace. But it makes a very interesting point. And the outcome of this exercise is very consistently the same. I would say out of 100 people, 98 of them have this experience. And it's an exercise where I have people imagine they're climbing up to the high diving board of a swimming pool or even a standard diving board. And I say, now what I want you to do is visualize all the negative thoughts, feelings, emotions, sadness, pain, and judgment flowing out of your body into the swimming pool. Just let it drain into the pool. And I let that go on for a few minutes. I say, tell me when it's all out. And then I say, now look at the water. So if all of you are listening can do it without crashing your car or your bicycle or cutting your finger off with your knife as you're cooking, just take a minute and visualize yourself standing on the end of a diving board and just letting all your fear, your insecurities, your fear of what tomorrow brings, your fear of COVID, your fear of what God might do to you when you die because you've sinned, your fear of who might hurt you again, and let it flow into the swimming pool. Then what I do is I say, now look at what's in the pool. What does it look like? What does it smell like? What do you see? And most people say something like, oh my God, it looks like sewer and it smells terrible. Or it's usually they say it's black or it's like a dirty blood red or something that looks kind of like you'd expect pain and fear to look. And then I say, now I want you to jump into it and tell me what happens when you jump into it. Did I do that exercise with you?
No, but I've heard you mention it before in the past. I don't think we did it in our coaching, but I love it. And I was just kind of feeling and going through it as you were sharing it.
Okay, well, let me finish it with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just see yourself on the diving board, look into the stuff. What does it look like?
I see a lot of cloudy blue.
Mm-hmm. What's the energy look like? How does it feel looking at it?
It feels very sticky.
Okay.
It feels a little heavy, but it feels like I have space between myself and it so I can, have a relationship with it now.
All right. So everybody that's practicing with us, go ahead, be brave, jump in the swimming pool and tell me what happens when you just dive right into it.
I start feeling a lot of energy moving through my body.
Now stand in the pool and look around now that you're in it. Did the color change?
It's a little clearer.
Most common thing that happens when people jump in is one of two things. They say, oh my God, the water's all clean now. Or they say, wow, it all disappeared. There's nothing here anymore. So the point I'm making is, you see, when you separate yourself from it, it becomes an object. And every time you try to interact with it, you keep putting energy into it, like trying to push against a wall to make it go away. Well, good luck. It's pushing back at you, like you said. But once you actually enter into it and say, let me actually go into this and see what's in there, there's almost always no substance to it. It requires us to separate ourselves from it and project our energy into it to keep it alive.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is the paradox of mind as well.
Yes.
I remember when I was, on my healing journey, just getting started and trying to understand a lot of the patterns that were coming up for me. I remember reading a lot of Eastern scripture, a lot of the Tao Te Ching and a lot of those teachings. And everything in those teachings was a paradox.
Yeah.
I remember reading these statements like, if you want to shrink something, let it expand.
Yeah.
Or if you want to get rid of something, allow it to flourish. And to the rational, intellectual mind, you're like, that does not make any sense. But I was like, okay, I'm having these looping, repetitive, obsessive, compulsive thoughts. I'm going to apply this teaching to these thought patterns and be like, okay, these thoughts I want to shrink or get rid of. So I guess I should allow them to expand and flourish. So I would tell these thought patterns, okay, like go play, go dance, go do whatever you want. And all of a sudden, as I gave space for that to happen, the mind goes completely silent, goes completely still. And what you realize is the more space you give these thoughts and emotions, the less they take. But the less you give them, the more square footage they need to take inside of you, because there's a need for them to be processed.